Hello, everyone. Welcome to In the Corner, the place where every cricketer wants to be. I'm your host, Calm Dunk, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Joining me to talk about the third test match between India and England, which we played in Rajkot, is Lewis Dade. Louis, how are you, mate?
Going very well, Callum. Enjoying what's left here of the Australian summer and a fine, well poised 2-1 series.
Yeah, absolutely. This contest was certainly a lot more one-sided compared to the last two games that we've seen in Hyderabad and Vizag, respectively. Uh, England had their biggest defeat in Test cricket in terms of the number of runs, which was 434. So a very comprehensive win to India in the end, but. There were some pretty outstanding performances in this game, Louis. Rohit Sharma was 131. Jadeja was 112, but also took 5 for 41 in the fourth innings. Sarfraz Khan really impressed on debut. He had 62, unfortunately got barbecued in the first innings as Jadeja was looking for his 100 and also backed it up with another 50 in the second innings. I think he finished on 68 not out. Jaiswal 214. This kid is seriously impressive. From an English point of view, Ben Duckett was 153. Mark Wood took 4 wickets in the first innings, and Mohammad Siraj, I thought, bowled really well in the second innings of the game to take 4 for 84. So I thought that was a pretty impressive performance on a flat deck. Louis, what did you make of the game? And we'll obviously touch on some of the highlights from individual players throughout the episode today. But overall, just what were your thoughts?
But this felt like the kind of game we're used to seeing India play at home, didn't it? Win the toss, score bulk runs up front, bowl opposition team out for unders compared to their first inning total. Let the run machine go to work and then set them a total they're never going to chase on what by then is a raging turner. It kind of felt like a return to normality, didn't it? India have got to be pretty happy now. A lot of their individual players are starting to tick boxes, and it feels like a very distant memory that England were running away with that first Test match. And so, despite the 2-1 scoreline, India will have to feel very comfortable now with the momentum they carry in this series.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But Louis, before we get into the performances of Rohit Sharma and Ravindra Jadeja on day one, we want to thank a new sponsor of ours, and that's Pitch It Up. Pitch It Up is a bowling machine company from Queensland. Fantastic bowling machines that are perfect to use in your backyard. So make sure that you head over to Greg Chappell Cricket Centre or Cricket Warehouse, wherever you may be around the country, or head to pitchitup.com.au to get yourself a fantastic deal. Something that would be very good for your child's birthday or a future Christmas present. So keep that in mind once we get towards the end of the year. Louis, Rohit Sharma, I was pretty critical of him previously on the last podcast that we did together, and I thought he was seriously under pressure, but, India were in a spot of bother at 30 for 3 on the first day, and he was able to, come back and make a pretty significant knock of 131, and it's just one of those much needed tons from a player who's been significantly out of form, and he's always got the potential to go big, and on day one was the day that he finally broke the drought, I suppose, and this is probably a really good sign. This is obviously a good sign for India, and I think the last ton that Rohit Sharma made was against Australia about 12 months ago in Nagpur, and he scored 120 on a pitch where the next best score I think was about 70 or so from from Jadeja, and the top Australian score was 49 by Marnus Labuschagne. So it was a pretty tough deck there in Nagpur. So what did you make of the captain's innings?
I think the easy thing to lose sight of in this innings is I think when Patidar got out, they were 33 for 3 or something like that. They were certainly in a position where this wasn't just necessarily him just going to work on a flatty and kind of, you know, home track bully kind of stuff. Sharma's feet looked a little bit heavy at the start of the series. He also did get a couple of decent balls, which is, you know, always something that's easy to forget. From this perspective, it's very clearing now for India. They can kind of relax and know now that their captain is assured of his spot once more. And from that perspective, I think he hasn't looked awful throughout the course of the series. He's kind of just looked okay. But just come in and score runs in a big game, and like I said, in a situation where a couple of younger guys were out early, put the team on his back with someone like Jadeja, who he's played a lot of cricket with. It's positive signs. Do I think he's slightly past his best, yes, but I still think he's got more than enough Test cricket in front of him for India.
Yeah, I certainly think he'll, get to Australia, and whether he goes on the England tour or chooses to go on that England tour next year will be a wait and see. But the man of the match, Ravindra Jadeja, as we said, I think on the first Test match review, I think he's certainly India's most important player, particularly in home conditions. Came in at number 5 ahead of Sarfraz Khan, who was on debut, and was able to absorb the pressure early, but I don't think I've seen him play so well through the leg side. I've always thought of Ravindra Jadeja as an offside player when he bats, and I thought that he clipped through mid-wicket extremely well. I thought he used his feet extremely well, got deep in the crease to cut the spinners. Um, he's just such a classy player, and his 4th Test century. Unfortunately, it was ruined a little bit by the barbecuing of Sarfraz Khan on debut, who was absolutely distraught. But Jadeja is I think he's genuinely India's most important player, and this innings certainly highlighted his importance to the team, especially after he didn't play in the last game. India was certainly good enough to get the job done in Vizag, but it's always great when you can have the quality of him as a bowler and the quality of him as a batsman in the side. What did you make of Jadeja's all-round performance in this particular game?
Yeah, look, you raised the point about him potentially being India's, most important player at this point in time. This was interesting in an innings where he scored his, I think, 3,000th Test run. And you start to look at the portfolio of a career that Jadeja's had, a guy that averages now 37 with the bat. As opposed to the start of his career where he was someone that we knew had batting talent, had scored first class runs, but wasn't necessarily converting. Look, the run out, let's call it what it is. It was egregious. Jadeja is in that category of guy that you could describe as a good or bad runner. He's a fast runner, but I certainly don't think his calls between the wickets are great, and he has been involved in more than one run out, I believe, in this series. So from Jadeja's perspective, the batting, I think within India have been very smart batting him higher and higher at home, and I think that's a very wise decision in the sense that he's that good at home. He is a number 5 at home, and bowling wise, this is what you expect from him in home conditions, particularly in a 4th innings. Spear him in, plenty of side spin. Some are going to go, some aren't. He's definitely, look, in my opinion, he's almost at home. He's probably actually a better bowler than Ashwin, and so no surprise that he was the man to do the damage in the 4th innings.
Yeah, the highlights of Jadeja's 5 for 41 are on our Instagram and TikTok page, so make sure you go and check that out and give that one a like. Sarfraz Khan, this was a great story. Someone who has been knocking on the doors for the Test team for probably two years and averages 70 in first-class cricket. As we talked, he made 62 and got barbecued by Jadeja in what was a pretty bad barbecue, so I hope Jadeja certainly made it up to him. But the fact that he was able to respond in the second innings as well and make 68 not out as they were looking to set England a total was really impressive. I loved how aggressive he was against the spinners. I thought he played the slog sweep, with really good conviction. And, when he did go hard, he made sure that he, gave it the full force. And more often than not, he cleared the boundary. And because of the aggressive nature that he played, if he ever did mishit it, it would either fall in a gap or go over someone's head. So I certainly think that India should stick with Sarfraz Khan based on what I've seen from one Test match. I think he has more potential to be a genuine gun in this team than Shreyas Iyer. And I'm not saying Shreyas Iyer, deserves to be on the outer for India properly. But I think he does need to wait his time until there's some more spots available in the middle order. We'll see what happens with Virat Kohli and KL Rahul and whether he continues to bat in the middle order. But I really like what I saw from him. It will be interesting to see how he would go overseas, but I think he does have more potential to be a proper outstanding player and a real gun in Test cricket and a real weapon in Test cricket. So what did you make of the young man on debut?
Firstly, he was a kid that was typical kind of Mumbai prodigy, right? I think he played first class cricket when he was 16 years old, and has just piled on the runs. I've no doubt he's been the victim a little bit of his physique. They actually panned to his old man a couple of times in the crowd, and I think broad physiques do run in the family. I can't speak for the In the Cordon podcast, but personally, I'm always a fan of girth, and I don't think it's going to stop him batting at the highest level. From my end, he was positive. You mentioned overseas. Geez, it'd be great to have a guy like that go and play county cricket, wouldn't it? Go get a bit of experience under his belt. Look, he seemed to take really well to the run out. He certainly didn't seem to sulk like a lot of guys would have. And every piece of evidence we have suggests that he's going to be a run machine because he's done it at basically every level he's played at. And not an elite T20 player, but as far as a Test match player is concerned, there's no reason to suggest he couldn't go on and be a stabilising force in the middle order there for India.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly hope that he does get to play the remainder of this series. And we'll talk about team selections later in the episode, but you think KL Rahul would be looking to come back for the next Test match. So it's probably Patijol who makes way at this point, but we'll have to wait and see. Before we touch on Jaiswal, let's talk about some Englishmen. And Ben Duckett, I've been a real fan of Ben Duckett, and I think ever since his inclusion back into the Test side in Pakistan 22, he's just looked the goods. And sure, his technique has looked a bit awkward at times. He's been, slightly uncomfortable against the short ball, but he was originally picked to play in these spin-friendly conditions, and we've seen that, he's able to use his feet well, he's able to sweep well, he's able to reverse sweep as well, and I think he's continuing to grow as a player. I think he averages close to 47 in Test cricket now, which is quite incredible for someone who was, I suppose, exiled from the team for about 6 or so years after playing on the last tour to India. So what did you make of Duckett, and how good of an opener can he be for England?
Look, I think in these conditions, compared particularly to other options, elite would be the answer to that question. I think as far as options England have to take to the subcontinent, I think there's no reason to suggest his success against spin can't continue. I think as unconventional and quirky at times as some of his angles on his technique can look, I think that's perfectly functional as a player of spin. I think we saw in the Ashes at home that there'll be some flaws with him as a player in faster, bouncier seeming conditions. But at the same point in time, with the way England want to play, he is the right guy for the job, no doubt. I think there's a stat that he leaves the lowest percentage of balls out of all Test openers, and you do have some concerns about that. But if England can get the reverse of what they're used to out of him, is someone that's reasonable at home and quite good in the subcontinent, as opposed to what they're used to, then I think that's a great option. Seems like a good guy to have around the team as well. And so from my perspective, there's no reason that Duckett can't go on and, continue to have a nice Test career. I don't think he'll retire as an all-time great by any stretch of that.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you there. And someone else who did do well for England was Mark Wood. He took 4 wickets in the first innings. I was a little bit surprised with England's team selection and not playing the genuine off spinner in Bashir, and I thought he bowled really well on debut. And whether it was Mark Wood or whether it was Anderson who played as the sole seamer, I didn't feel Anderson was particularly effective in this game, but I think that was just more of the nature of the wicket rather than anything else. And on those really flat decks, you do want someone who can bang it into the pitch. And I thought Mark Wood did extremely well. And as we talked about, Mohammad Siraj, took 4 for 84 in England's first innings, and that helped, India get a really big lead, and they were obviously able to cash in on it. So what did you make of the performances from the 2 outstanding quicks in this game?
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, you think traditional Indian pitch, right? But, Siraj did a fair bit of key damage there for India. You look at, Ollie Pope, obviously, pinning him in a 50-50 LBW in the first innings, ripping through the lower middle order there with guys like Folkes and Rayan Ahmed. It's good for, from Siraj's perspective, I'm glad to see, because at the end of the day, he's had a bit of a bizarre 12 months, including this first Test in this series where he basically wasn't used, and the whole bizarre World Cup final for him, which was a very similar situation. He's a guy that we know when he's at his best can run through a batting lineup regardless of the conditions. If I look at Mark Wood, he toiled hard. England certainly looked to use that short ball in the first innings, and he's really the only guy they've got on this tour that could do that consistently. Mark Wood, given his age, we don't know how much more cricket, Test cricket he's got in front of him, but he's hard not to like when he keeps coming back and bending his back for the best part of 28 overs on the first innings in a tough Indian conditions for a fast bowler.
Yeah, I certainly think that Mark Wood has grown in leaps and bounds, particularly over the last 2.5 years, I would say, probably close to 3 years now. I remember he came out to Australia and certainly got a lot of admirers when he came to Australia when they lost 4-0 out here. And he was the one guy who certainly enhanced his reputation after that tour. And obviously we're able to see him dominate at Headingley last year and really create that wow factor, that X factor that teams are looking for these days. In the second innings for India, Jaiswal made 214 and Shubman Gill, after getting a globe in the first innings, was able to respond with 91. Unfortunately got run out in a mix-up with Kuldeep Yadav, the night watchman. But, these two players are just so exciting for Indian cricket. I don't think I've ever seen an Indian opener in my time come in and create such excitement. And Jaswal's only 21, I believe, and he's already got 2 double hundreds, and he got 177 on debut against the West Indies. So this kid's growing in leaps and bounds. I'd love to see how he goes in Australia and England in particular as well, and those will be his next 2 big tests. But geez, this kid is so exciting, so much optimism, and Shubman Gill is another one, so much optimism. We saw what he was able to do as a 20-year-old 4 years ago here in Australia, and it will be interesting to see how he goes at number 3 when he comes out here on Australian shores. But what did you make of the two of them in the second innings, and how critical was that partnership to truly burying England?
Look, I divide them into slightly different categories. I think Shubman Gill is developing into a nice, well-rounded test batter. I think there are some flaws still a little bit in his technique at times. I think given the caliber of the player there, he's going to keep tightening up and improving. And you do mention coming to Australia. I think if he can back up runs in Australia after doing it once already, I think that really does cement his place as one of the best young batters in the game. Jaiswal is almost a different conversation because it's so hard to pick a flaw in this kid, right? Like he comes on the scene, great record, great story behind how he got to this point. We talked about Khan and his record in first class cricket. The kid averages 77 in first class cricket. It's just hard to see, and I'm sure in seaming conditions he won't be scoring this many runs. But geez, it's hard to see a flaw in the guy's game. He's aggressive, but not in a way that looks uncontrollable. And that's also another thing that's quite unique. I think he became the first person in Test history to hit Anderson for back-to-back-to-back sixes, which is weird because in my head I'm sure George Bailey did it, even though I know he didn't. There's a lot to like there. You just hope that the game doesn't become too complicated because I can only imagine the pressure that's going to be heaped on his shoulders as the next best, young Indian batting talent, which I think did affect Shubman Gill over the last 18, 24 months a little bit.
I still think it would be so exciting for India in the future if Gill and Jaiswal were able to open together, and whether that happens in the future, who knows? But I think a left-hand, right-hand combination like that, two players who can be extremely aggressive at the top of the order in Indian conditions would be so exciting to watch. And I even think in Australian conditions, we do have some relatively flat pitches over here, and I think that would be really exciting to watch. Louis, let's cast our mind ahead to the 4th test match between these two sides. And obviously England really need to win this one. And that's just, it's stating the obvious, but, we had so much hope and optimism, I suppose, that this series was going to be genuinely close after the first game. And even after the second match where England did lose, we still thought there were some really positive signs. In terms of team selection, I'm not sure how quick the turnaround is between these two games. I don't think it's much, and I think there's a bit of a break between this fourth and fifth test. But yeah, I'd certainly be looking to bring Bashir in. I think they missed him in this particular game. Joe Root is a serviceable off spinner, and I think he has been underbowled in Test cricket in the past. But at the same time, I genuinely think you need a specialist off spinner, and you know, I don't know whether Tom Hartley's starting to look tired, but I don't feel like he's getting the same zip and penetration off the wicket as he's I suppose had in the first couple of games. And I do think England are really missing Jack Leach here. I think he's just such an important cog in this team, and we've seen whether England would have won the Ashes had he have played that game at Edgbaston in particular. Who knows? But hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I think it's just even more highlighting Leach's importance to this team. I think Johnny Bairstow is under serious pressure to retain his place. I know that Dan Lawrence is the reserve batsman over there, and unfortunately Harry Brook's not going to be available, but I certainly think that Bairstow is under pressure. He's been getting out in similar fashions, and if England are going to give this series a real shake-up, then I do think they need to do something at the selection table. I think, Root's obviously seriously out of form, and, we know what a class player he is. We know how much he's dominated in India in times gone by, but he's someone that is, in a bit of a slump. He's bowled more overs than he scored runs in this series. That's a fun fact for you. But for India, I don't think too much is changing. I was shocked that Axar Patel didn't play in this test match. I thought, Patel's batting could certainly be of use instead of Patidal, but whether that happens, whether they want to play four genuine spinners is interesting. But I think KL Rahul will be fit for the next game, and Patidal will make way at that point. What would you envisage both teams doing when it comes to the next test match?
My gut feel is that England won't make the double change, because there was a lot of talk when Lawrence was added to the side that they consider his bowling to be a part of it, and that's why I'd be sceptical they'd both bring in an off spinner and bring in a guy they think can supplement the spin bowling stocks. Look, if I was picking the teams, I would do the double change for England. My suspicion is that they will rotate out one of the bowlers and bring Bashir back in. I think Bairstow will probably have a little bit more clout within that locker room, and that probably gives him another test match or two. But I'm with you. I think it's time for him to change. Look, don't India have an embarrassment of riches? I mean, you're right. Patidar seems like the one that probably goes. But at the same point in time, it does feel like India can kind of pick whatever bowling attack they like of the combination, and it's going to seem to work for them. It would make sense to work Axar back in, and some of it comes down to conditions. That being said, it's pretty hard to kind of look at changing this bowling lineup too much for India when it's been so successful, unless anyone's feeling sore or like they can't play.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on all those points, and it will be interesting to see what the pitch is going to be like for the fourth Test match, and I think that will certainly dictate team selections in this particular one, and whether. I think for England, it's more about whether they choose to go for the three spinners and the one seamer, or whether they stick with the 2 and 2. But with a quick turnaround, or quick-ish turnaround, I'll say, for the next game, I would see it hard for both Anderson and Wood to back up. So I don't think Robinson or Atkinson would play. It's just a matter of which one they want to go with. But Louis, just wanted to say a big thank you for coming on In the Corner again. It's always great to have you on the podcast, and you certainly help our viewers get a great insight into the game.
It's a pleasure, Callum. Definitely looking forward to this fourth test. Wanting an England win or a draw purely to extend this series being alive into the fifth test from my end.
Absolutely. And we've got some more coverage of some cricket going on around the world. Australia's T20 tour to New Zealand starts. So we'll do a review at the end of that 5-game series. And we've also got the test matches coming up as well. So that will be really exciting. So make sure that you're following In the Cordon on all of your major social media pages and your podcast platforms to get more updates from us in the future. Take care, everyone. Cheers.